Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today I'm going to show you how to quickly and easily paint up this Khorne Blood Warrior for your games of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. So the first thing I've done is I primed the model black, as this will give us a nice smooth, even base coat for the rest of our colours to work from. Now the first thing I'm doing is I'm coming in with some Mephiston red. And with this I'm going to paint all of the armour to the model. You want to build this up over a couple of thin layers so we get nice smooth even coverage of Mephiston red all over the armour panels to our Khorne Warrior. You don't need to worry about being neat at this stage. You can get the Mephiston red over other areas because we will be coming in later and painting over all of these details. But for now, make sure you cut all of the armour panels on the Chaos Warrior with a couple of layers of Mephiston red. There are a lot of armour panels on this model, so make sure you take your time, work your way around the model, and in a couple of layers build up to a solid, smooth coat of Mephiston red all over these armour panels on our Khorne Blood Warrior. And after a couple of layers of Mephiston red, you can see that I've built up to a solid red colour all over that armour. So the next thing I'm going to pick out is any little bits of exposed skin on the model. For this, I'm coming in with some deepkin flesh. Using a nice small brush, I'm going to carefully find any areas of skin showing through from the armour panels. I'm just going to pick these out with a couple of layers of deepkin flesh. By using this off-white colour, it's going to allow us to get that really chaos-possessed look on the skin, just by using some shades and some simple highlights. But for now, just pick out any areas of exposed skin with a couple of layers of deepkin flesh. Some of these are tucked in some awkward to reach places. So just make sure you check all over the model, see if you can find any skin showing out between the armour panels. Pick them out with a couple of layers of deepkin flesh. Once that deepkin flesh is applied, we've picked out all of the bits of exposed skin. So now the next thing I'm going to do is to pick out his boots and his belt. For this, I'm going to use Corvus Black. I'm just going to apply this all over the boots and the belt to the model. Obviously being really careful around the areas of armour we've already painted. Just make sure you pick out all of these areas you want to be black with a layer of Corvus Black. I'm using Corvus Black here instead of Abaddon Black because it will allow me to apply a shade over the top and get some definition into those recesses. Just be nice and careful and pick out these details with some Corvus Black. At this stage as well, I'm also picking out this tuft of hair hanging from his waist. I'm just going to pick this out with some Corvus Black as well, just so it looks like a tuft of black hair hanging from his belt. And with those details picked out, the next thing I'm going to pick out on this Chaos Warrior are any of the leather details. So for that, I'm coming in with some Rhinox hide and pick out areas here like the strapping on the handles to his axes. Obviously being really careful around the armour and the skin. Make sure I carefully pick out all of the strapping on the axe handles. And I'm also going to pick out any of the straps that are holding the armour plates to his body as well. So I'm just going to make sure I catch all of these with a couple of layers of Rhinox hide. And with that Rhinox hide applied, Now it's time to start picking out the metallics on the model. And the first of these metallics I'm going to use is Lead Belcher. I'm going to use this to pick out both of the axe heads, so I'm just going to apply a couple of layers of Lead Belcher all over the heads to the axe, as well as the exposed bits of handle as well. This will take a couple of layers to build up to solid coverage over these areas. I'm just applying a little bit of Lead Belcher all over the axe heads and the exposed bits of handle. And I'm also going to pick out any of the chainmail on the model. So he's got different bits hanging on different places. So I'm just making sure I catch all of these with a couple of layers of Lead Belcher as well. And with the Lead Belcher applied, the model's really starting to come together now. So the next I'm going to pick out is all of the trim on that armour. For this, I'm coming in with some Balthazar Gold. I'm going to very carefully apply this all over the areas of trim on the Chaos Warrior. Obviously, I'm being really careful around the rest of the panels that I've already painted with red. I'm just going to make sure I pick out all of this detailing with a couple of layers of Balthazar Gold. This step is going to take a while, but by picking out all of these trim details, it's really going to make that armour pop and give some really nice detailing all over the model. So really take your time at this stage, pick out all of this armour trim on the Chaos Warrior with a couple of layers of Balthazar Gold. Don't forget areas here, like around the top of his head, on these horn details. Get all of these out with some Balthazar Gold as well. Sure, I do it nice and neatly so I don't get any of this over the red armour panels. Also lots of sort of trinkets and details and things like that on the model. So I'm going to pick out any of these markings with some Balthazar Gold as well. So we'll tie them into the rest of the model, really add interest all over our Chaos Warrior. I'm also picking out any of the detailing on the axe heads as well. All of this trim I'm picking out with a couple of layers of Balthazar Gold as well. With that Balthazar Gold applied, you can see he's really added that detail all over the Chaos Warrior. So that's just one final base colour left to apply. And that's going to be with some Retributor armour. I'm going to use this to pick out any of the trinkets that are on the model. There's going to be areas here like the skulls, on the chest plate, shoulder pads, helmet, etc. Just picking all of these out with a little bit of Retributor armour. I'm also picking out trinkets here like these Khorne symbols hanging from his waist and any other detailing like that. I'm just picking this out with a couple of layers of Retributor armour. And with that Retributor armour applied, that is all of the base coats applied to the Chaos Warrior. So now it's time to shade the miniature. So the first shade I'm coming in with is some Agrax Earthshade. I'm going to apply this all over the armour and the trim to the model. So I'm making sure this sinks into all of the recesses, but I don't want it to pull too heavily. So if I do find it pooling anywhere, I'm going to wick it away with a dry brush. Just going to make sure I coat all of these areas with some Agrax Earthshade. This will give us that dirty, grimy appearance to the armour that you want from a Chaos Warrior. And now with some Reichland Flesh Shade, I'm just going to apply this over the areas of exposed skin we painted. This will work with the deepkin flesh and give that impression of possessed chaosy skin. And finally, with some known oil, I'm going to shade this all over the things we paint with lead belcher, Corvus black and Rhinox hide. So you're going to pick out all the axe heads, the chainmail, the boots, any of the hair, the belt and the strapping to the axes. If you're enjoying the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you would like to support the channel and become a member, please press the join button down below. And after those shades have dried, you can see they've added definition all over the model, really giving it that dirty, grimy Chaos Warrior appearance. So now it's time to start applying some highlights. And the first highlight I'm going to apply is some Wild Rider Red. For this I'm going to edge highlight all of the armour. So I'm just applying a thin line of Wild Rider Red at the edges of all of the armour panels. So wherever you've got a bit of detailing or a sharp edge on any of the armour panels, I'm just applying a really thin edge highlight of Wild Rider Red. This will really make all of these armour panels stand out and add interest all over the model. So really take your time at this stage, work your way around the model, and wherever you find a solid edge or raised detail on the armour, I'm just applying a thin edge highlight of Wild Rider Red to all of these areas. There are a lot of panels of armour and detailing on it, so just make sure you work your way around the model and apply a really thin edge highlight of Wild Rider Red to all of the details on the armour panels. Try and keep your lines nice and thin. Just apply small edge highlights to all of the armour with a little bit of Wild Rider Red. And with that Wild Rider Red applied, you can see how it's picked out all of those armour panels. So next thing I'm going to highlight are the bits of exposed skin. For this I'm using pallid witch flesh, and I'm just going to apply a thin edge highlight on any of the sharpest details to the skin, so tips of the fingers, knuckles, things like that, as well as around the edges of any of the muscles. Just going to apply a thin edge highlight of pallid witch flesh to these details. And with that pallid witch flesh applied, it's really given the impression of possessed skin on the Chaos Warrior. So next, with some Mechanica Standard Grey, I'm going to highlight all of the black details. So details like the boots here, I'm just picking out any of the raised, sculpted in detail on the boots. So all of the folds, all of the creases, I'm just catching the tops of these with a really thin edge highlight of Mechanica Standard Grey. I'm also picking out any of the strands of hair, very lightly picking these out with a thin highlight of Mechanica Standard Grey, just to make these hairs stand out. And I'm also going to highlight the belt at this stage as well, just applying a really thin highlight on the top and the bottom of the belt, just to add some interest. With that Mechanica Standard Grey applied, you can see it's really added definition to all of those black details. So the next thing I'm going to highlight is all of the leather. For this, I'm coming in with some Baneblade Brown. I'm just going to apply this as a thin edge highlight to all of the leather straps on the model. So I make sure I pick out all of the edges to the straps on his axe handles. There's a nice sculpted in detail here, so I'm just picking this out with a thin highlight of Baneblade Brown. And I'm also picking out the edges to all of the straps, holding the armour panels onto the model as well. The Baneblade Brown applied, you can see it's really made all of those leather details stand out. So the next thing we'll do to add interest to the model is paint the eyes to the Chaos Warrior. For this I'll be using Uriel Yellow. I'm just going to very carefully apply this to the eyes and the helmet. This will give the impression of yellow eyes glowing out from that Chaos Warrior's helmet. Those eyes really add interest to the model, make that face stand out. So now with some Stormhost Silver, I'm going to start highlighting a lot of the metallic details. I'm going to start off with by edge highlighting anything we paint with Lead Belcher. So for the axe heads, I'm just picking out the edges of all the raised details. See this one here has a pattern carved into that axe head, so I'm just picking out all of these details with a really thin edge highlight of Stormhost Silver. I'm going to apply a little bit to all of the parts of the chainmail as well. Let's just give the impression of light catching the chainmail. Really make that chainmail pop on the model. And now I'm going to apply a really thin edge highlight to all of the trim that we painted with Balthazar Gold. This stage is going to take a while. Make sure you keep your lines nice and thin. Just apply a thin edge highlight of Stormhost Silver all over the trim details on the Chaos Warrior. We're keeping these lines nice and thin. We'll still make all that trim read as a brassy colour rather than silver. It will give the impression of it being shiny and the light catching on the edges of all of these trim details. So really take your time at this stage. Keep these lines as thin as you can and just apply a small edge highlight of Stormhost Silver to all of the armour panels. And with that Stormhost Silver applied, you can see it's really made all of those armour panels stand out on the model. So now there's just one final highlight left to apply. That's going to be with some Liberated Gold. I'm going to highlight any of the gold details on the model. So it's going to be all of those trinkets and details like that. I'm just picking out the sharpest edges with a really thin edge highlight of Liberated Gold. Keep these lines nice and small and just pick out any of the sharp details with some Liberator Gold. And with that Liberator Gold applied, that is how to paint a Khorne Blood Warrior for your armies in Age of Sigmar. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know in the comments down below, are there any other Age of Sigmar models you would like to see me paint? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and happy painting!